call to the lectern Mr. Malcolm Hoenlein, Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations.
Thank you very much. That's okay.
People that made this day possible today. Ronald Lauder, who works tirelessly all over the world to bring the story of the Jewish refugees to light. Bob Sugarman, you are the President of Presidents, a man who is doing an amazing work. And finally, Stanley Uhrman, whose dedication is inspiring. I'd also like to conclude to thanking Lucette Langnado, Linda Menuchin, Levana Zamir, and Tufik Kassab, who have joined us today to share their personal stories.
Thank you, Linda, for sharing with us your painful story and also for ending it on a positive note. Levana Zamir serves as the president of the International Association of Jews from Egypt. Mrs. Zamir, family roots in Egypt date back over 2,000 years. She became an Egyptian refugee at the age of 11 when her family fled to France. And now Levana lives in Israel.
Okay. ערב טוב, חברים. Good afternoon, friends. Thank you for coming. Friends from Egypt, living in New York, Arlette, Vivi, Dina Rekanati, Monique, thank you so much for being here with me, with us. Well, my story begins on May 14, 1948, the day David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. At midnight, 10 Egyptian officers broke into our house, searching everywhere. They opened all the closets, all the drawers. They cut the mattresses. They found nothing. They did the same to my uncle Habib Vidal. They found nothing too, but they took him to prison. They told him, you are a Zionist. He wasn't. He just wasn't. We had a movement of young Zionist adolescents, but not really the generation of my father, my parents, our family. The same night, Egyptian authorities did the same to 1,600 Jewish men and 50 women. They put them in prison. Next day, the Egyptian authorities confiscated our family business, one of the largest printing house in Cairo, owned by my father and his two brothers, one of them in prison. So they said, you are Zionists, you are enemies of this country, so we confiscate all your assets, and they did. But my own trauma was next day when I went to school. The teacher told me they took your uncle to prison. I couldn't believe, because at this age, 10 years old girl, for me, going to prison, you must be a criminal. My uncle was a criminal. I cried and ran, asking my mother. She explained to me calmly, they took him to prison just because we are Jews. All of a sudden, for me, being a Jew was a crime. While at school, my best friend, all the years, was a Muslim, Aitan Heikal, an aristocratic Muslim family. The second one was a Christian, Yvonne Fadul. We used to be the trio at school. Not anymore for me. I felt marginal. I was a Jew. It was a crime. My parents never shared their problems with us, but I realized that never things will be the same again. Nothing will be again the same. And then, persecutions began all over the streets of Cairo. My brother, 16 years old then, on his way to school in the bus, was beaten by a group of young Arabs, Muslims, by chains. A good friend of him, a Muslim, Ghazar, I remember him. He was the best friend of my brother. He saw him bleeding already, so he shouted to this young crowd, "Leave him alone, he is a Muslim like us." He saved his life. But it wasn't enough. In the middle of the night, the telephone rang. I am sure Lisette knows that. The telephone rang, and nobody there. Silence. Some other times, we felt stones on our windows, thrown on our windows, and we didn't even dare to open and look who did it. At the same time, in 1949, the Muslim Brotherhood declared that all the Jews in Egypt has to be now back to the dhimmi status. I'm sure you know what it means. Well, it didn't happen because then the Muslim Brotherhood was a marginal party, not today. And they are doing this to the Christians, the Copts, they burn, as we just heard here, they burned churches. Then they couldn't do it, but it wasn't nice for us to hear that when hundreds of us were in prison, our assets confiscated. After 2 years in prison, my uncle was released on one condition. He had to leave Egypt directly from prison, handcuffed to the ship. We had to live with him. Egyptian authorities came to us, to my father, telling him, "Look, you will find your brother on that ship, that day, that hour. Go on, itfaddalu." It was clear. We had to leave. In the middle of the night, like thieves, we left home. My mother just closed the door and we went to Alexandria with one suitcase, each one of us, and 20 Egyptian pounds. But you know, I was very happy. On our way to Alexandria, I discovered that we are going to France. Well, good. I spoke French at school, at home, everywhere. France was a culture. I was really glad. But not for us. For us, France was just a refugees camp, Camp d'Arenas, near Marseille. We just received a hangar for 3 families, a narrow room, each family a wall. We had 9 beds because we are 7. I have 6 brothers and me and my parents, so we had 9 beds on a wall. That was home for us. It was horrible for my parents, you can imagine, after the life we had in Egypt. As yesterday, one of my friends said, "Dina, you told me that it was very easy for everybody, for all the Jews to live well and beautifully and nice in Egypt. Even the poor, they could have very, very nice and beautiful life." And it was so. So for my parents, it was horrible, but also for us. I remember once I wanted to go out of the refugee camp with my 2 young brothers, and French children, our age, shouted on us, "Sale juif." You know what it is? It's dirty Jews. I didn't understand then. I asked my mother, "What's that?" She told me, "They don't like us." That's all. And then, 3 months after this refugee camp, the Sochnut came to my father and told him, you know, the Jewish agency, they told him, "Now you can make Aliyah, it's your turn, you and your family." But my father said, just a minute. No, I don't want to make Aliyah. I began to work in Marseille. We will leave soon the refugees camp, and that's it. But then my mother, it was the first time I heard my mother telling my father no, because in Egypt it was always my father telling what we have to do. She said no, and she succeeded. She said, I want to go to a country where everybody is a Jew, so nobody could tell my children sale juif anymore. And we did. We made Aliyah, but what she didn't know that the refugee camp in Israel, the Ma'abara, was awful. The most terrible refugee camp. We just got a tent, a big one, of course, we are 9 persons, but in the winter of 1950, it was a very, very hard winter, and in the middle of the night, the rain, the wind, the tent blew up, and all the rain on us. Now I can laugh, but it wasn't a comedy at all. It was very hard. Well, after 3 years in the refugee camp, we went out of the refugee camp. Not like the other group of refugees who are still in camps with their children, their grandchildren, and their grandchildren. By the way, I met with Aitan Heikal, my Muslim friend. She came to Tel Aviv. She came to my house. She even slept in our house in Tel Aviv. I went back to Cairo. It was really like a dream come true. We never talked politics. We just felt just like in our childhood. That's it, people to people. Now, I hope they already put this document you see here. It's a certificat de réfugié. It's a refugee certificate given for Jewish refugees from Egypt when they left or were expelled. And this one was given, you must know that, perhaps you can read, it was given by the mandate of the United Nations for Refugees under the New York, it's written somewhere, under the New York Convention from 1954. So what are we talking about? We want recognition? This is a certificate, and Vivian Acker, then from Alexandria, is now here. She is American citizen. She is Vivian Levy. Vivian, I want you to, okay. So you see, this is the real thing. And not only Egyptian Jews were recognized as refugees, also Iraqi Jews, because they were stripped from their citizenship, so they became stateless. So you are a refugee. You know what? I am a refugee living in Israel, which is a huge refugees camp, believe me, but a prosperous one, where everybody is learning, everybody is working. More than 55% of Israeli citizens are refugees from Arab countries. Do you know that? That's the truth. Minister Silvan Shalom told me once, we are more than 55%. Israel, the state of Israel, is a miracle. It's not for granted. It's not invincible. God will help us to continue to keep this miracle continuing for the people of Israel, for Am Yisrael. Thank you. Toda Rabah.
Our last speaker, thank you, Levana. Our last speaker is Tofik
As all this
Kassab.
occurred, the world stood silently and watched the persecution and discrimination. Today, much of the world remains silent on this issue. This injustice cannot continue. The truth cannot remain hidden. The stories of the Jewish refugees cannot be forgotten. The total area of land confiscated from Jews in Arab countries amounts to nearly 40,000 square miles. That is 5 times the size of Israel and 85 times the size of New York City. Israel's government and the World Jewish Congress are compiling a list of assets that were left behind by Jewish refugees as they fled the persecution. The Arab countries must accept responsibility for the billions of dollars of property they confiscated, for the holy sites that were looted and destroyed, and for the suffering of the 1 million Jews who had no choice but to flee for their lives. The United Nations must also accept its share of responsibility. In this institution, we hear a great deal about the suffering of the Palestinian refugees, but we never hear about the suffering of the 1 million Jewish refugees forced to flee from Arab countries and Iran. Over the last 65 years, the UN and its agencies have spent tens of billions of dollars on Palestinian refugees, but not a cent on the Jewish refugees. And since 1949, the United Nations has passed more than 100 resolutions on Palestinian refugees, and not a single one on Jewish refugees from Arab countries. Tradition teaches us, in Hebrew it says, Da me'ain bata ula'an ata olech. It means, know where you come from and know as well where you are going to. We understand that to build a better future, we must learn the lessons of the past. I spoke to my mother earlier today, and she is proud that I'm here in the United Nations telling the story of our family. But it's just one of the million stories that need to be told. For too long, the stories of the Jewish refugees from Arab lands and Iran were untold. Their suffering and their rights ignored. Today is about bringing Jewish history to life and the stories of the Jewish refugees to light. I hope my words will open the eyes, ears, and hearts of the international community so that Jewish refugees will finally receive the justice they deserve. Thank you very much.
What can be accomplished when people make new lives? It is time for the UN to recognize that both sides have had their share of problems. It is time to acknowledge that there are 2 groups of refugees in this conflict. While we recognize that the Palestinians have had their own share of problems, we hope that they will be able to rebuild their lives, just as the Jewish refugees have done over the past 70 years. I thank you all for coming. Thank you.